guests from San Carlos, welcome. Welcome to our beautiful, humble little church. I love this scripture that Jane just read because it is a gentle reminder that Jesus did not mind going to places where people who were not fond of him were. He was at the house of a Pharisee. I mean, this religious leader, this person people looked up to, they wanted to be. I mean, this person had power, he had prestige. What he said went. And they invited Jesus. I've always thought that was a little unusual. So here Jesus is amongst all the hobnobs, and it's the big party, and it doesn't matter whether the host likes you or not. It is about being seen. It is about sitting as close as you can to the host, because the closer you are to the host, the more prestige you have, the more power you have. People look up. They want to be like you. So there's always this rush to get to the front. Jesus gently reminds them, you might not want to always get up to the front, because if you do, they may want you to sit somewhere else. And so I've always found it just a little bit interesting that here Jesus is amongst all of this power, this prestige, and he's saying, you might not want to show off all of your power and your prestige. I can remember February of 2002. My grandmother celebrated 100 years. Now, that's a debate in the family, but we'll say it's 100 years. Some of us think it was 102, but we won't go there. So the family decided to have this great big party. And so we all got together at this place called Gloucester, Mississippi. I'm sure you all know where it is. And it's in that southwest corner of the state. And you go to the sign that says the middle of nowhere. You go 2 blocks, you've got Gloucester. Because it was in the middle of nowhere. And my grandmother had this very small house, and the family thought, oh, we'll invite all the family and friends that we can, and we'll have a good time. Well, it's hard to have a good time in a very small house if there's 75 of you. My grandmother was quite popular, and so all of her friends, a lot of the family was there, and I came in. I wasn't in ministry at this time, please remember that. I came in, I walked in, I said, where's that young lady? Where's that young lady? She goes, Thomas, come on in here. And so I'm move out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. And she's sitting on the couch that she typically sat on all day long. And my cousin, who I didn't particularly care for, was sitting right next to her. And I'm like, she didn't get it. I mean, nothing. I go, you want me to move? Yes. She looks over at my grandmother. My grandmother just kind of looking at her like, when are you going to move? And so she moved. She said a couple of things I can't say up here. And then I sat down. How are you doing, young lady? And we just kept going back and forth and back and forth. And here are all of these family members who've just gotten there who wanted to let my grandmother know they were here. Well, her time was being occupied by me. And so my father came in to the house and he goes, so where is Thomas? And one of my family members goes, he and Granny are holding court up in the den there. So my grandmother and I were holding court. And then a little bit later on, somebody else came in and said, so where is Thomas? Granny and Thomas are holding court in there if you want to go and try to risk being seen. Now, I'm glad Jesus wasn't there, because he would have probably come in and gone, you, move. Let somebody else sit there. But so you don't seem to understand. I'll say it this way. My sister and I had a very special place in my grandmother's heart. She loved all of her grandkids, but my sister and I spent the most time with her growing up. And I took advantage of that situation, of that kindness, and I had to remind myself over and over again that if I had to do that all over again, I wouldn't do it the same way. Because I sat there with her for an hour and a half. And I can imagine what all of these people were thinking. Jesus is like, okay, don't sit up front because you may be asked to sit in the back. And what you're doing is really not a part of God's work that you so proudly proclaim. Because God's work is different. God's work is a place where all feel welcomed. Invite people who don't make you look good. That's what Jesus was saying. Now, I like to put it this way. Invite people whose only gift they have is their presence. Think about that for a second. What does it mean to be invited to a place where the biggest gift that you bring is you? I hope you felt that way this morning. I hope as you walked in that you felt that welcome. That the greatest gift that I can offer this place is me. And just me. I don't have to do anything special. But I just come and be me. And sometimes we forget that the greatest gift that we bring is us. But I want to ask you something. Knowing that that's the greatest gift that you can bring, can you feel welcomed? Do you know what welcome feels like? That's not always easy. Now, I should just do a little disclaimer here. My work is in trauma recovery. I've been doing it now for almost 10 years. So when I say the word trauma, a lot of people will think, okay, he's talking about veterans who have experienced trauma. Okay, you're right about that. I'll be talking some of that. My examples will, of course, be that way. But I also want to look at you all and say, you know what? We are people of trauma also. Now, all I have to do is say the word COVID. And our whole world changed. Our whole world changed dramatically. And so one of the things I want to encourage you all to look at is something that I realized about a year ago that I was doing. It's called trauma-informed theology. What does it mean to recognize that you are around people, including myself in this case, who've experienced trauma? You've been around people who understand the word mask and the phrase wearing a mask. Because you see, one of the biggest things about a welcome is that people like a sense of belonging and a place where they can feel loved. That's what we typically think about. Trauma-informed welcome, though, is a gentle reminder of the word safety. What does it mean to find a place where you are safe? Bingo. Bingo's mother, I want you to know I'm always with you. What was the first thing she said? Was a gentle reminder that you are safe because I am here with you. And my friends, the events of this last week have shattered the safety of a lot of people. Not just those who were affected immediately, but for our society as a whole. I went to a church, the Cathedral of Hope in Dallas. We had to have security there. Jim was one of their interim pastors. I hope they didn't have to have security when you were there. But we got visited by a lot of folks who didn't think the church should exist. So we had to have armed guards. And I say armed guards because we had people who threatened us. But you know, it didn't stop us from coming. We knew that we belonged in that place. And that's why we were there. Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Eventually, the guards didn't have to come anymore. And I would like to say that we felt safer, but we didn't. But then we began to realize that the safe place we were looking for was there. I can remember a veteran telling me, Chaplain, when I leave this program, I want to find a church. He was going back up to the northern part of our state, and he said, I want to find a church. This gentleman had anxiety issues, especially social anxiety issues. He also struggled with the idea of sitting with somebody behind him. Hypervigilance, PTSD. It's PTSD signs. And so he said, I want to go to a church. He'd been coming to the service that we had there at the VA. And he did. He found a little church. He said, I will go to the church and just enjoy their service. Now, he got in to the service. He was about a minute or two late. Trauma-informed welcome says, that's okay. He got a minute or two late, and he was sitting in the back. Most of the folks were sitting up front. And the pastor was up there, and he was just welcoming everybody and all, especially our friend in the back there. Why don't you come up and join us? Come on up and join us. We're a friendly bunch. And I mean, just kept on and on. In fact, he stepped down from up here and started headed toward where the veteran was, to get him to come up front and join us. I'm glad I didn't know that, Pastor. Because what he did was he took a moment of safety and made it unsafe for this individual. So my friends, we don't always know what trauma we bring in here. My hope is that you find this place a healing place, and that the welcome that you receive not only gives you safety, but gives you a place where you feel like you are loved and belonged. That's what I think Jesus was asking his folks to do, was to provide a place where you feel welcomed. You feel safe. You feel like you belong. Because, you know, there's nothing worse than feeling like a second-class citizen in a first-class world. But if you find a place where you're welcomed, hopefully here today, you'll come back. You'll want to be a part of us. And you know, one of the things, though, I do want to make sure that when I say safety, my hope is that we will provide a safe place, but not compromising the safety that's already here. We had an issue a little bit with that. I mean, you know, when we started coming back here after COVID, everybody had to wear a mask. That's a safety issue. We had a couple of folks who didn't. We encouraged them to wear a mask. You know, my friends, that is something we don't compromise on, because it was for the safety of everyone here. And you know, I have to remind myself that being a chaplain, being what somebody would call the vision of God that people see at our VA, that scares me when they say that. I bring off, I'm seen two ways. I'm the happy-go-lucky person, but I'm also the chaplain with the master's, the doctorate, and the years of experience in providing spiritual care for our veterans. I don't always embrace that side, but I need to when I want to provide a welcome. Jenny was one of our veterans in our program, in our women's program. A very, very shy, very quiet person. She didn't want anything to do with me. In fact, when she got there, she said, I didn't know you had a chaplain. If I'd have known that, I would have never showed up here. And they were like, well, we did let you know spiritual care is a part of our program here. Well, I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him at all. Okay. All right. That gets my ego a little bit. But I also realize it's not to be taken personally. It's not the happy-go-lucky Thomas. It is the chaplain that she did not want to be a part of. And so for the first 30 days, I didn't even know what she looked like because I didn't see her. And then I walked into her and I said, hi, you must be new. I'm Thomas. And she goes, I'm Jeannie. I've been here for 30 days. And she was an artist. And so those of you who know I love art, and I love to talk about art and reflect on it. And so I saw one of her art pieces and I said, oh, can you tell me a little bit about that? Trauma-informed welcome. Can you tell me a little bit? about that? She goes, well, this and this and all. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. And I realized that I only had a limited amount of time with her before I would become a little too much. And so I thanked her and walked off. I saw her again about 4 days later. She goes, let me show you my new piece of art here. And I said, okay, that's nice. And so we looked at it again, and I asked questions, and I showed an interest in her. Welcome. When you have an interest in me, when you have an interest in those who walk through that door, whether you've known them all of your life, or whether the first time you've met them, what does it mean to welcome them? Show some interest in who they are. And so we continued to talk a little bit. She had an assignment. I did not know that she attended church for years and years and years. And she sought help from one of our chaplains in the military. And the chaplain disappointed her. And at that point she said, I want nothing to do with religion, God, especially a religious leader. I hear that a little bit more than I care to admit, because you see that trauma-informed welcome was not there. And it created pain, it created hurt. But I realized that she still wanted to connect. We had that desire to connect. And so I reached out to her a little bit, and I said, we're glad to have you here. I want you to know that I really enjoy your art. Could we speak for just a moment, bring an art piece, and I'll be glad to talk with you about it. And we did. We had a 45-minute meeting. One of the things she was asked to do was to attend my service, or attend the service we have at the VA her last week there. And she did. She sat through the whole thing. I was really surprised. And the thing was, she sat close to the front, which for those who have trauma in our programs over there at the VA, typically it's in the back against the wall. In fact, we have a place set aside just for folks who are hypervigilant. And so she sat there for the whole thing. She got up. At the end of the service, she thanked me for it and walked off. Now, a couple of weeks later, I got a FedEx package from her. Her drawing. She gave me this. She said, Chaplain, I want you to know that my spirituality is still dark. But yet, the light is kind of coming through. She found a church. She found a very small congregation that just loves her. Just loves her. And she said, I felt welcome there. They let me sit in the back. They didn't talk to me if I didn't want to engage with them. I mean, they were just as nice as they could be, and they said nothing. Trauma-informed welcome. You don't always have to speak. And so she's gone back and over again and found that place where she can have a spiritual home. And so I look at this painting, I have it in my office, and I remember her. I remember the smile that she had. I remember the fear that she had also. But she found a place where she could be welcomed. And so, my friends, I encourage you, where are those places where you feel welcomed? Right now, there's a lot of people in our country who don't think a place like this, a sacred place, is a safe place. There are people who 20 years ago experienced one of the worst hurricanes down in my home state of Louisiana who still don't feel safe. And that's been 20 years. So my friends, we have a challenge. What can we do to provide welcome for those who walk through our doors? What can we do to show the humility, the grace, the joy, the happiness that this place has given many of us? I encourage you to think about that. I encourage each one of you to think about what is your part in doing that. And realize you don't do it perfect. We'll never do it perfect. But yet, when we show that welcome, we give something that people long for. and that's connection. May it always be so. Amen.